Greetings. God's hand and the TV news compares news media and their reports with what God is telling us is going to happen. Many in our world have a vague idea that the term Armageddon comes from the Bible, but very few study the chapters before and after the word Armageddon to discover what it is that's God's given meaning for the word. Now, many in the news are talking about a nuclear Armageddon, which they presume would mean the end of humans on planet Earth. Most people would be surprised to learn that God will keep Earth functioning for at least 1,100 more years, according to what he tells us. North Korea has been increasing its missile launches, making it obvious to the world that they could land their nuclear warheads on American soil. Now, this shakes people up, it disturbs them, it makes them more fearful, wondering about their futures. So, is it likely that North Korea will send nuclear bombs to the United States? By looking at God's predetermined war map, we can understand that North Korea will never land a nuclear weapon in America. So we have this: expect no incoming North Korean nukes. That's what God is telling us. You shouldn't expect anything nuclear to land in America from North Korea. Now, North Korea has been increasing its missile launches, making it obvious that they can strike us, sort of saber rattling, right? Jesus has given us large amounts of data showing the events to happen in the final decade before Jesus takes control of the planet and all nations on the earth. One master plan event begins in Daniel 11:40. There we find a 6-verse countdown showing the major wars that occur shortly before the beginning of the 3.5-year tribulation. Daniel 11:40 reads, "At the time of the end," meaning in the last 10 years or so before Christ comes to rule the planet. Daniel and the apostles were eager to learn of the events leading up to the return of Christ. They kept saying, "Tell us, tell us, tell us, tell us." Daniel wanted to know, "Tell me more," and the apostles wanted to know, "Tell us." The apostles were saying in Matthew 24, verse 3, "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?'" Now, the end of the age of man doesn't mean the end of humans on planet Earth. It just means the end of the age of man and the beginning of the new age of Jesus controlling planet Earth. Daniel had been given large amounts of data for the time of the end, but he still could not understand the full picture. So he said to God, he was having this conversation with God. Daniel 12 verse 8, "Although I heard what God was telling me, I heard the information that was coming in, I was writing it down," and we have it written there in Daniel 12, "I did not understand. Then I said, 'My Lord.'" So somehow or other, Daniel is having a conversation with God Almighty. "What shall these things be? What shall be the end of these things? Tell me more, I want to know more." And God explained that the information Daniel had written was to be understood in the last days of the age of man, but not to be understood by Daniel. Understood. So there's much end-time data available in the Bible. Daniel wrote some of it, but couldn't understand it, and God said, "That's okay, you don't have to understand it, because I'm having you write it so that it can be understood later on towards the end of the age." So God gave Daniel an outline of the major events in Daniel chapters 11 and 12. Fascinating 2 chapters. We see God's reply to Daniel's question in Daniel 12:9. He said, "Daniel, go your way, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. So for thousands of years since Daniel wrote it down, people have been going, I wonder what it means, I wonder what it means. Well, now it's the end time. Now it's unsealed at the time of the end. Now we can put it together with Matthew 24, we can put it together with Revelation, we can put it together with other clumps of data that God has given us in the Bible, and it's to be understood. God said it would be understood in the end time. So God wants end time people to understand God's plan, that God did not give understanding to Daniel. So now back to Daniel 11:40. The biggest Arab attack against America occurred on September the 11th, 2001, or we call it 9/11. God had told Daniel about this attack in verse 40, but Daniel couldn't understand. Most people don't understand it today. If you go and read Daniel 11:40, and I'm telling you that that's 9/11 and the 20 years that followed it, you're going to go, well, wait, I don't see what you're saying there. You have to take it a piece at a time. You have to understand each little wording and then refer it to the conditions that we have in the world today. So a quick reading of Daniel 11:40 leaves most people with many questions. At the time of the end, the king of the south, most people don't know who that is, shall attack him, and the king of the north, most people don't know who that is, shall come at him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. We know what many ships means. And he shall enter the countries and overwhelm them and pass through. Most people don't see that the 20 years since 9/11 in this verse, after one reading, because they don't focus on the clues that are hidden in the text. Now let's read it this time with some Bible data to help with our understanding. Daniel 11:40, at the time of the end, the king of the south and the king of the north, read those who descended from Europe, the king of the north, right? The king of the north kingdom was set up after Alexander the Great died. One of his generals took that top north of Jerusalem, north of Israel section, and Alexander was from Greece. Greece is in Europe. So king of the north is descended from Europe, shall come against him, right? The Arab terrorist camps, like a whirlwind, with chariots and with many ships. Now, most people may or may not know, there was a movie out about it, but within 3 weeks, the American president had bombs dropping on terrorist camps in Afghanistan after 9/11. Only 3 weeks. And we were dropping bombs on those terrorist camps. So there was a quick response. If you Google, and then we were there for 20 more years, and we pulled out in 2022, we pulled out in 2021. So if you Google King of the North, you can discover that Alexander the Great of Greece died, and 2 of his generals set up kingdoms north and south of Jerusalem. So south of Jerusalem is Egypt. Egypt is Arab territory. So when the king of the south, that's Arabs, pushed at him, that was 9/11, he came back with a whirlwind and chariots and many ships, a modern superpower with many ships. You can guess who that is, right? So the northern was from Greece or from Europe. So in modern times, the kingdom of the north is European descent. On 9/11, 19 Arabs attacked the Twin Towers in New York City using passenger planes as flying bombs. The whole Western world changed that day. And if you were a regular passenger on airplanes up until that day, things were a certain way. That day and from then forth, it's been a whole new ball game, a different way of flying. Yeah, I haven't flown lately, but you had to take off your shoes, you had to take off your belts, you had to take off your jackets, you had to take all the coins out of your pockets. It's like amazing how the world's changed. So airline travel became totally different. 3 weeks later, like I say, Americans were dropping bombs on terrorist camps in Afghanistan. The giant clue in verse 40 is the words, many ships. So in the time of the end, a superpower retaliates to an attack with many ships. Now, how many superpowers are there? 3. How many of them have many ships, like many aircraft carriers? My understanding is Russia has 1 aircraft carrier. China, I think, now has 3 aircraft carriers. America, I think, has deployed like 14 aircraft carrier groups right now and has more in other places, right? So there's a clue. So Daniel 11:40, at the time of the end, the king of the north shall come against him with many ships. So we just read that the end time super military has and uses many ships in military campaigns. Ask yourself, which mighty military in the 21st century operates with many ships? And really there can only be one answer. The answer should help you see that Daniel 11:40 describes 9/11 with the following 20 years that follow, right? Another clue is the words pass through. Now, by the time you read all of verse 40 of Daniel 11, you're already a little bit confused, and you get down to the last 2 words, overwhelm them and pass through. It's like pass through. What does pass through mean? Well, if you look at the Greek words, pass through could have been translated withdraw, right? Now that's a whole lot simpler, and that's exactly what happened in Afghanistan last year. America withdrew from Afghanistan after 20 years after 9/11. So if you Google Afghanistan withdrawal, you can see many articles about the American pullback or withdrawal from Afghanistan in August of 2021. So America used many ships to overwhelm and then withdraw from Afghanistan, right? The very next verse shows World War III. So we have this. Next verse shows World War III. And people go, I thought World War III was going to be a nuclear exchange, like maybe with North Korea or with Russia or with China. No, God wrote it out for us and put it there so we can read it and understand it. God tells in the very next verse of Daniel 11 that the same many ships will be used in World War III. Daniel 11:41, right? We read verse 40. We take a good look at that. We go to the very next verse. He in verse 40, shall also enter the glorious land, Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. Well, most people read that and they go, okay, so he enters the glorious land, Israel, and many, whatever that means, countries, whatever that means, shall be overthrown, whatever that means. Right? Verse 42, he shall stretch out his hand against the many countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So now we know precisely one of the many nations, right, Arab nations, that will be captured, that will be overthrown. Verse 43, he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians also. World War II was a ground war in Europe involving many countries from around the world. Even Australia got involved in World War II. So this Daniel 11:41 war is a description of a similar type war using many ground troops who overthrow, to blast out into oblivion many nations, just uses nuclear weapons, right? But to overthrow them and then to have total control over their precious things, right, needs boots on the ground. Now, if North Korea had already hit America with nuclear weapons, World War III would be a nuclear war, not a conventional ground troops war. And God is saying, ground troops war, God is saying many nations, Arab nations that attacked Israel, will be overthrown, and they'll be under the control, all their precious things will be under the control of this superpower that has many ships. God does show a nuclear war after the Arab-Israeli World War III. So yes, there will be a nuclear war. It's coming, right? It just won't be missiles, nuclear missiles coming from North Korea. So we look at this, we see that Egypt gets captured, then during World War III, right? So Egypt gets captured, that war comes first before nuclear war. All right, so the main point here is God tells us not to expect North Korean nuclear attack on America before the Arab-Israeli World War III with ground troops. And so if you have nuclear exchange, what happens to us then? We go to the next step. If a bomb from North Korea landed on America, what would we do? We would, as we already told them, we'd just wipe North Korea off the surface. But that would then bring in Russia and China because they have borders with North Korea. So with all the TV talk of nuclear missiles, most are not expecting, absolutely not expecting, not thinking about, not talking about another massive Arab attack against Israel. Now, if you Google Israeli wars, you can see that Arab nations have attacked Israel many times in our lifetimes. It's like we don't pay much attention to it anymore. Major attacks have occurred from the Arab nations on Israel in the years 1948, 1956, 1967, and then more in 1973 and 1982 and 2006. Now, some of us are alive in that time, some of us weren't, right? But look at all those Arab nation attacks on Israel, right? Many are not aware that young Arabs are taught to hate Jews living on what they believe to be Arab land. Now, if you ask most people this question, will World War III occur between Israel and the Arabs? They'll tell you no, because they're thinking World War III will somehow involve nuclear war, right? But if you consult God and what He's written in the Bible, you'll see that God is saying, absolutely, yes, World War III will be a conflict between Israel, many Arab nations, and the superpower that has many ships. Again, God says, at the time of the end, Daniel 11:41, He, the many ships military, shall enter the glorious land, go into Israel to protect them, and many Arab nations shall be overthrown. Daniel 11:43, He shall have power over the treasures of gold and all the precious things of Egypt and the Libyans and Ethiopians. So, when your TV sets show Egypt being captured in the Middle East, you can turn to Daniel 11:41, 42, and 43, and tell your friends, and you can tell your family, you can say, this right here in Daniel 11:41, 2 and 3 is what God said and what He told us was going to happen.